Hello, Alexis. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Amiee?
I am good. I am excited to embark upon our newest series, Astrology 101. Um, we have plans to look at the sun, moon, and rising, each of the zodiac symbols, the planets, the houses. We are taking requests. If there's something you would like to see us move into with this Astrology 101 series, if you have specific questions, um, we want to be able to help you look at your chart and have some clue what you're looking at because it can seem like a foreign language. And we want to work to demystify that a little bit. So I'm really excited. Today, we are launching part one of Astrology 101, and it's going to be the zodiac signs. We're going to touch in on the sun, the moon, and the rising. We're also going to start with Aries through Virgo, which are the first kind of the six first signs of the zodiac, starting in March.
Yes. Yeah. So today we're going to be diving into the zodiac signs. And so we'll try to cover for each sign the modality, what that means, the element, the symbol, obviously give you a lot of just the qualities and information on the sign itself, and then also the chart ruler and what that means. So yeah, it's really helpful if you have your sun, moon, and rising, because then you get to those are the three kind of like foundational pieces to your chart. The sun being that outward personality. That's the one that people are usually most most familiar with, because it's the month you were born. It's a month long. It's associated with the sun, where the sun was when you were born. So that one most people know. Most people know their sun sign. The moon and rising is one that people usually don't know, but you can look it up. So we'll include in the show notes too a link where you can look up your chart. But you can go to astro.com or any, astrological birth chart calculator and get your moon and your rising. And those are more like the moon is your inner world. It's your emotions. And for me, it's kind of this, what nourishes you, like the things that really nourish you and light you up internally. And your rising sign, which you need your birth time, the like exact time you were born. It's usually on your birth certificate, or you can ask your parent, but that is the time will give you your rising sign. And that is associated with, it's the way you interact with the world. It's, kind of the way that you embody a lot of things. So all three are important. They're kind of the three foundational pieces. And so you can listen through, as we go through the different signs, you can listen for your sun, moon, and rising. And of course, you can also listen. It's interesting just to have an overall view of all of them. And also people in your life, right? Like, oh, I have a friend who is this, or I have a friend who, So lots of information as we go through the zodiac, but just to give you an overview, that's kind of what it'll look like as we go into each sign.
And we can drop a link to a natal chart creator, because I can't find any words right now. Cat's wiggling things. We will drop that in the show notes. I also do astrology readings, so you can reach out for that. And I think it would just be fun for our listeners, so they have some real life examples for each of us to drop in what our sun, moon, and rising are, like how we kind of self-identify with our zodiac. Because I certainly used to be like, oh, I'm an Aries, because I'm an Aries sun. And as I have studied astrology and been in this world and learned my chart more, now if someone asks me, I say, well, I'm an Aries sun conjunct Nemesis, a 12th house Cancer moon, and a rising Leo. So that actually flushes me out a little bit more than just saying I'm an Aries sun. Because I am really deeply connected to my feelings and my emotions. Anybody who works with me or interacts with me knows I spend more time asking people, well, how are you feeling? Or how does that feel? Or what does that feel like? My Cancer moon really comes out. And people who work with me see my Leo self come out. I often joke that my hair is normally up. And so when my hair comes down, I have my lion's mane out. So that's just a little to kind of give you some guidepost and orientation. My fiery Aries sun conjunct Nemesis, who is she has a bad rep as the goddess of retribution, which is not true. She's a goddess of balance. She balances out all human ill and human good. You will see her blindfolded with a sword, and her sword tip is it's always on the ground because she's not going to strike. She is the original blind justice.
Yeah. And you have that double fire with the water. I would like to look at like the elemental, right, depiction, and you're a firewalk instructor. Like, you know, like fire is very much a part of what you do, not just in your personality, but also like you took it into the physical of working with fire. So I think that's interesting too, to look at the elements, right? Like the composition there. And yeah, so I have my sun in Aquarius, which it's funny, I have identified with more as life has gone, but definitely identify with Aquarius for sure. That, you know, I attribute like my love for astrology and the way my mind works around all of this to just my Aquarius sun. I have a Sagittarius moon. I also have what's called a stellium in Sagittarius. So that's when you have 3 or more planets in a sign. So I have 4 planets in Sagittarius. So I have a lot of Sagittarius energy, which is also something interesting to look for. So that might be another piece to add, is if you have 3 or more planets in a sign, that's a sign to pay attention to too. So that's where my moon is. And that's why I feel like travel and like all of these, like I love to learn and education, those things nourish me. So that's my moon. And then my rising is Taurus, which I just love my rising Taurus. Like I'm such a foodie. I really do. I think that was interesting. Like throughout life, people attributed me to be really grounded and really like, it wasn't until I realized later that I was a Taurus rising that I was like, oh, that's how the world sees me. They see me as this very grounded, you know, and we'll get into all of the signs as we go, but it's an earth sign. And yes, so that is my Aquarius, Sagittarius, Taurus kind of composition. So I have air, fire, and earth. And so there's that spread there. And I also love to look, go ahead.
No, go.
I love to look at what is not like as prominent, right? So you have, like we're going over our elements. We have a mix. Some people have all of their elements in one sign of those 3, but then also looking at, and this is getting a little, you know, deeper, but just to give you an overall view, because we will be doing, you can always go and listen for the planetary podcast we'll be doing. But if you don't have any of those 3 major things and your personal planets, if there's an area of your chart that's lacking, for instance, I don't have any personal planets in water. So for me, like I need to live by water. I need water to like be a very big part of my life so that I can add that into my life. Because I don't like natally have a lot of water. So that's another piece to look for of like elementally, like where are a lot of your planets, where, you know, including your rising sign, and then where is maybe there less. Just something, you know, it's an interesting thing to look at. And so the personal planets would be Mercury, Venus, and Mars. So that is, I feel like, a little overview. And yeah, you get to listen to as we go through each sign, you get to get more on all of the zodiac signs. But yeah, just so you have a little, you know, overview of what our makeup is.
Love it. I was going to say regarding your rising Taurus, that Alexis is one of the best people to go out to eat with. For this reason, you may be able to just simply identify the really Taurian people in your life, because they are going to really have a passionate love for food, good food, and wine. I know that when I'm with Alexis, that we are eating magnificently the whole time. because her Taurus rising really demands it. And it's fun. Enjoy that.
I love it. I totally love it. It's very true. Yes. So let's dive in, and then we'll get to expand on all of these signs, because we've given little snippets, of the signs just based on our astrology. So let's dive into Aries. So you mentioned you have an Aries sun, so I feel like you'll have a lot to, contribute here to Aries. But I talked about the modalities, right? So just what the modalities are. There are three: cardinal, mutable, and fixed. So we'll start with Aries because it's a cardinal. We'll start with cardinal, and it's fire. It's the element of fire. Its symbol is the ram. So when I say cardinal, cardinal is of the three, right? You can think about mutable. Mutable things shift and move. Fixed is sounds like it fixed. Cardinal is the initiatory. It's that beginning energy. And Aries, being the first sign of the zodiac, has that for sure. It's this very initiatory, that spark. I always think of Aries as like go, 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 right? Like that energy. And, a good reminder for Aries is like rest, take a break. Because it's that ram energy, right? Of wanting to like always push forward, which is beautiful and like very helpful. Need that. And right, it's that balance. So that's the kind of overview there. Cardinal fire, symbol is the ram.
And we Aries are ambitious, which is funny because years ago I would have never said I was ambitious. And I was driving with a friend this weekend, and we were talking about something, and I said, so I just want the whole world. And I stopped and I was like, oh, maybe I am ambitious. If I want the whole world to do something. So there's an ambition in the Aries drive.
Yeah.
There can be a level of stubbornness, but not to the extent that, say, we're going to see when we get to Taurus. It can be, Aries can almost feel a little bit more tunnel vision-y to me. We get fixed on something and like, that is where we're going. And so it can really be helpful to have somebody take off our blinders and be like, look, there's all kinds of other stuff here you can look at and experiment with and feel into. We are very fiery. Like we tend to get passionate and loud. I don't know. Do I get loud, Alexis? I laugh loudly. I'm a loud laugher. And Aries, one of the ways that I work with the zodiac and do my astrology work is through the body. So Aries is the head. When we look at this from a body perspective, in the course of a standard birth, the head is the first thing that emerges. So Aries is oftentimes associated with kind of our infantile self. This is our baby self. There's a focus, discovery to it. And I don't know if that makes sense. That's how I feel it. Having been a mother of an infant, there is a focused discovery where everything is new and fresh. So there's that cardinal piece of it, that initiatory, reaching out, and it's not even just the reaching out. Like, you yourself are so new and fresh as an infant. It's that, for anybody who's been around an infant, the day they discover their hands is just an amazing thing, because they didn't know they had these things and they could grab on to things. And that to me is always a very Aries energy, is that discovery and the ambition to continue to explore, to continue to wonder what's there, and to initiate movement towards that. It doesn't mean it's gonna stay. That's where our fixed and mutable energies come in, is Aries is an ignite, like we're going to light this. And then it's about calling on other energies to make it sustainable.
Yeah. And that excitement of like the passion is really important, of like what excites me, because that drives the Aries, right? It's that excitement, it's that passion, because otherwise it can get really, to just keep pushing forward. Like they have that energy so they can, but if it's something that they're not passionate about, it's going to be draining, right? So it's a very different feel. Like that passion and excitement is really important for Aries. And also when you said tunnel vision, like the word I use is laser focus. Like it can be that laser focus, which can be very helpful, right? Like when you can be laser focused into something, it's like, if you're really passionate about it, like you could go all day working on it. And then you realize at the end, like, wow, like, yeah, I'm exhausted, but I had this passion. I was so laser focused. That's a word I like to use. That feels it also feels, we'll bring in the chart ruler who's Mars. So I guess we'll just go into that each sign has a chart ruler. So what this means is there's a planet associated with the sign. And when you look at your rising sign, this is where it comes in. So if you look at your rising sign, that planet that rules that sign, your first house, your ruling sign, becomes your natal chart ruler. So as we go through the planets and you listen for your rising sign and then which planet rules that sign, for instance, if you are an Aries rising, Mars would be your chart ruler. And so I say, just pay attention to this planet. It's just something to, like, when they go retrograde, when, you hear, oh, Mars is switching signs, just something to kind of keep your eyes and ears open. And so Mars, will bring in Mars because Mars is very much associated with Aries. He's the warrior. He has that very, like, that inner drive. He's very focused. He's an igniter, right? Like all of these Aries words are very Mars. He also rules Scorpio, which we'll get to later. And that's a very different flavor of Mars. So Mars, who is, associated with Aries, that warrior, that spark, that, that very igniting energy. And so again, if he is your chart ruler, just taking a look at where Mars is, like, what's he doing, and sometimes if I'm going through stuff, I'm like, let me just pull up my chart, just see what's going on. And I'll look for just anything that's going on. I'll also look at where my chart ruler is. And because Mars is so igniting, like when he aspects things, he just really brings this fire to it. Knowing he's your chart ruler can be helpful.
Yeah. I was giggling. Can I tell the puzzle office story? Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right. Please chime in. What Mars moved into Aries, didn't he? At that point. So we were sitting, Alexis.
It was like the night Mars moved into Aries. It was like the minute Mars moved into Aries, this is what happens.
Alexis and I are happily sitting in my living room working on a puzzle. And we've been like just steadily kind of fussing with it. And I got up and I dismantled my whole home office. Meanwhile, Alexis is sitting at this puzzle and she's literally picking up pieces and she's putting it together a row at a time. She's not designing any particular, she's just picking out random pieces and they just are going, every single piece she picks up just gets placed one after another in a row. This was very Mars in Aries in his home sign energy.
Yeah.
I had to get up and move. My Aries sun was like, I can't continue to sit here. And our Aquarius sun is like, and 1, 2, 3. She's just placing piece after piece, row after row. And I'm dismantling bookshelves and pulling furniture out. And the piles of books around Alexis are growing and she's just picking puzzle pieces. This was Mars. It was activating. It was stimulating. There was a freshness to it. This was during, I think, one of his retrogrades, wasn't it? And
I don't know if it was retrograde, but mind you, this was at like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And so like we should have been winding down, and all of a sudden we get this burst of energy. Amiee like redoes her whole office, and I like, that's not like, you know, that doesn't happen where I just like pick up a piece and like everything goes perfectly. It was just this laser focus, right, on this puzzle. And for Amiee, it was just this complete rearranging of her office that like couldn't stop her, like could not stop her. Yes, that is definitely Mars and Aries both, right? When they come together, it's like
Aries is a
exciting.
very instinctual sign. It's instinctual desire. It's really learning to trust our instincts, is working with our Aries energy, is trusting our the deep quiet, like it's not just, we've got the head knowing, the heart knowing, and the gut knowing. And Aries to me is always that deep, like womb or gut knowing.
Yeah.
Well, the head is the physical body part. There's an instinct to Aries, and it's the instinctual desire to go, you know, rearrange your office or other more fun things.
Yeah, I love it. Yes. Any other pieces on Aries?
Aries can be reactive from a standpoint of, we can respond to things as if our life is like in danger. Like there's a level of fight or flight that comes with the Aries instinct. So I feel like that can be like, we have my life is in danger response, which, you know, can be a little bit much. And Mars breaks things down. That's one of his actions. He doesn't work with the transformation and the rise of the phoenix the way Pluto does, but he can work to break things down. And since this is the place where he is at home and feels comfortable, is in Aries. Aries can have a tendency to break things down with our enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And our laser focus, our tunnel vision.
Yeah. And having a lot of Aries in my life, I know a lot of Aries sun and moon people, and it can feel that reactivity can feel like intense at times. It can feel like, oh my gosh, like they're coming at me, or like their energy is just so much, or right, like even if they're just passionate about, it doesn't have to be from like an angry place, it can be passionate about anything. And you know, and not always, like we're always well-rounded, right? And we all have, this is another piece to add, we all have qualities of all the zodiac, right? So we all have qualities of Aries. It's just when you have emphasis on them, right, it becomes a bigger part of who you are. But the energy of Aries, sometimes it can feel like that, like a ram, like right, like running right at you, like, whoa. But when you know that, this is another piece of why, you know, you can listen to friends and family, like what their qualities are, of being able to like see that and understand it and see it as a passion and like embrace it and be like, oh, I love you. Like, yes, like I love your passion, rather than, you know, sometimes if you first meet someone or you're not so familiar, you're like, wow, that can feel a little just like intense for me. Because it can be that reactivity. It can be this very passionate energy. And depending on what it's focused on, right, it can almost be like, don't get in the way.
Don't get in her way. It feels worth mentioning that there is an aspect of the spiritual warrior to an Aries, very much in its highest. Aries is really altruistic in nature, like that passion and that fire and that fuel. It's courage. Like Aries comes with a tremendous amount of courage, and an attunement to their personal power, like that deep gut thing I had spoke to, and really to move from, so say we have a really shadowy Aries. Aries can be seen as selfish and insensitive, where they're just out for their own survival. They can also be seen as violent or aggressive. So that's the shadowy Aries. All of these come with shadows. To really decondition out of that mess, and Aries, to clean up your Aries energy, is really about staying in your gut, that instinctual, that instinctual desire I spoke of, to be able to find your spiritual warrior, so that you're fighting for your own desires rather than fighting against anybody else. And to do that, you really need to stay present. And we have almost a cultural stigma against making mistakes. And I know as an Aries sun, that can, if we start to look at them as mistakes, like they're not mistakes, they're not screw ups. We tried something and it was like take one and it didn't work great, or take two, or take three. And as long as we're continually shifting how we do it, so we're not moving into that definition of insanity of doing the same thing and expecting some different result, they're just attempts at trying to move from that deep instinctual gut place of bringing forward our desire pieces. Because there is a pioneer aspect to Aries. It is the first sign of the zodiac. It is a cardinal sign. So there is a pioneering, there's a willingness for trial and error. There's an impulse for self-discovery. Like, how do I dig and move with this? So while Aries can be seen as selfish and self-centered, if it's clean, it's an impulse for self-discovery to really hone and work with that spiritual warrior energy. Because there's like that spiritual warrior is the birth of our mystic.
Yeah. And it's really important. Like, what is that inner drive? Like, what is it connected to? Right. Because if it's connected to a deep purpose and a deep desire, that's going to fuel one thing. If it's connected to, an attachment to success or money, or these, like, not as aligned things, it's gonna lead in another way. Right. And so it's like, what is that deep desire? If you have that connection to it, yeah, it's very much connected to the self and the individual, but it's going to lead you right in a much different place that's not selfish. And if we look at, how the zodiac, just the overall view of it, Aries is the self. That's where it begins. And then you'll see the evolution as we go through the zodiac. And then we come all the way back to the other side of Pisces, which is the last sign, which is this very universal, like oneness, like everything. So you go from the self and you go all the way around the zodiac, right? For instance, when you get to the opposite side of Aries, the polarity to that on that axis is Libra. It's about other and relationships. So you can feel there's always that polarity between the axis of what is opposite the sign, and looking at the whole picture. It starts with the self with Aries and then moves all the way around to Pisces, which is this whole sign of oneness, this universal kind of energy. So again, just because we're giving kind of like, Aries is getting the example because we're going to move around the whole zodiac, but to give you that overall view, feels important too, that it's like Aries is also that planting the seed. It's that very, new beginning. It's the first sign. And in the astrological year, like the astrological year begins with Aries season, right? Which is March. So there's that too.
Oh, we love starting out the astrological year. We little Aries babies.
Yes. So, and that's another piece to it. So Aries season will run March through April, correct?
Yeah, we start depending on the given year. It can be anywhere from March 19th to March 21st. So it's another reason that it's worth having your birth time and looking at your chart, because you could mistakenly be thinking you're a Pisces and really you're an Aries.
Yes, that has happened because
We know.
year, and especially the time, right? So like you can't even just go by, if you're on the cusp is, you know, one of the things. Also, I had estimated my birth chart by like 8 minutes, and my moon was in a completely different sign. So within 8 minutes, my moon moved. So, you know, another reason the birth time can be really helpful. But yes, definitely look it up, because exactly, it does fluctuate year to year.
Yeah.
And I've had that happen too, where people think they're one sign and they're actually another. So yeah.
So it's if you have the access to the information, it is worth looking, because you may have gone through your life thinking you were a Pisces, and everyone around you is like, oh no, that person is definitely an Aries. And you may end up pulling your chart and being like, oh, the year I was born, Aries started on the 20th rather than the 21st. And I've always thought that the spring equinox, which is where Aries starts, was the 21st. Except it shifts.
It does. Yeah. And another piece to bring in, and now kind of going to the planets, but it feels helpful, is sometimes Mercury can be in the sign. He's usually in your sun sign. So Mercury is the way we think. But oftentimes if Mercury is in a different sign than your sun, people can say like, I feel like I don't really feel like my sun sign. Like I think like, for example, if your sun is in Aries, but Mercury is in Pisces, very different, right? But I think like a Pisces. And so that can also be really helpful. I find like Mercury is the other one that's just very the way we think and the way we communicate, that's a very good one to look for too, to be like, oh, I don't really feel like my sun sign, but oh, I can see the qualities of my sun sign. And then I'm thinking like my Mercury sign. So throwing a lot in there, but it feels like all of these pieces, right? And again, just take what resonanates, but yeah.
And I can say my Mercury is my sun is 8 degrees. My Mercury is 22 or 23 degrees of Aries. So I think like an Aries. Yeah, you laugh it up over there in Rhode Island.
But that's a lot. That's most people, is their sun and their Mercury in the same sign. So they're going to think like their sun sign, right? So it just adds that like, yes, I think like my sun sign. And so that's why for people who have Mercury in another sign, it's like, oh, I kind of like, there's pieces of it, but I think differently. So yes, but totally, I agree. My Mercury is in my sun sign too. So I totally am with you.
And you do think like an Aquarian.
Yes. Yeah.
Our Alexis is an idea generator, and she's brilliant and she's fun. Yes. Our little Aquarius.
Totally. So Taurus, are we ready to move?
Taurus.
Taurus.
Bring on the bull.
Bring on the bull. So yes, Taurus is a fixed earth sign. It's the bull. And you can feel like fixed earth is very like dug in. It can get the, it can be called stubborn. You had, pulled that in from earlier, but it is really this like fixed. And the beauty of this stubbornness can be like, I'm going to stand for this. Like I am really just have this strength to stand for what I believe or whatever it is. And I guess we can drop this in now since we, are having that, but it's ruled by Venus, because I feel like that flavors it for sure. So again, if you're a Venus rising, your chart ruler will be Venus. And so again, just paying attention to what Venus is doing when Venus is retrograde can be very helpful, just to watch Venus's journey for everybody. But then if you are a Taurus rising, you can just have that emphasis there for you. So Venus would be your chart ruler. But yeah, it has this very Venusian feel. It's like all about the senses. Taurus, of the 3 earth signs, is the most sensual. And it's very connected to food and like experiences and art, like using all of our senses. Touch is a big one for Taurus. It's this very physical touch and all of the senses, right? Like just being in nature and all of those things are very Taurus qualities.
Yeah, absolutely. Taurus has a yin nature. Aries is yang. Aries is fire and out. Taurus is yin and in. Looking at our self-worth and our self-value, it's, whatever got initiated in the who am I Aries then becomes the what do I value with Taurus. So there is an aspect, and this links up to Venus, of self-worth and self-esteem, and what do I value? It's a fixed sign. So it's very much, there's an organization and a sustainability to it. It is of the earth. It's, it's that plodding bull that you yoke, and it's one step at a time. There is and like Taurus, Aries can feel stubborn to me. Yes, Taurus in its shadow feels stubborn. But there's a real, like just a consistency to Taurus of one step after another. Like, I know where I'm headed. I see where I'm going, and I'm just going to keep taking steps until I get there. There's a sturdiness to them. And for me, Taurus is, are we listening to what our needs are for nourishment and like that, all of the Venusian, like, harmony and food and comfort. Like, are we listening? The body parts that go with Taurus are the jaw, for the clenchers out there, the neck and the ears. Are we listening? Can we be in touch with our senses and what we're picking up that is going to value and nourish us?
Yeah. And you brought in that quality, like that newborn quality with Aries, and how there's that excitement for like the new. If you think about Taurus, the next stage is that toddler phase where it's like, I'm picking everything up. Like, I'm putting things in my mouth. I'm like wanting to experience. It's like, ooh, I'm realizing there's all of this stuff that lights me up, that excites me, that nourishes me, that allows me to interact with my environment and take in what is going around, right? And so you can think about like a toddler, it's all about that. It's like, I'm going to just, put this in my mouth. I'm going to do all of these. I want to like get into everything. That's that Taurus energy of like being aware of our surroundings and how we interact with them and how they nourish us. Also like the way our house is set up, right? Like, what are the things that aesthetically please us? Right? Like, these are all these Venusian kind of Taurus elements. Yeah,
love it. There is I think about a toddler, and that's when object constancy starts to come in, that things are going to stick. And there's that your self-reliance starts to come up. Like, I think about, like, I can put on my own damn pants. Right? The toddler wants to do all of it, regardless of whether they actually can or not. So that can be a piece of Taurus, is
like taking on too much. Definitely.
That like, I've got all of this. And with Taurus, it's, we talked about Aries being the spiritual warrior. With Taurus, is your spirit being fed? Like, now that you've figured out where your spiritual warrior sits, how do you feed that warrior? How do you nourish? Very, very Taurus, like, are we nourishing it? Are we taking care of it? Are you in tune with nature and the earth, and keeping in mind that our body is the earth? And how do you value it? How do you value your body? Because how you value your body is, I hope, going to be reflected in how you value the earth, and vice versa.
Yeah, there's a big connection to the body and the relationship to the body and what that can look like. And, over time, like, it's not always easy. And oftentimes with the Taurus energy, it can be like an interesting journey with the body. So that's something too, or with food, you know, the relationship with food, right? Because there can be, with all of these, there can be the exalted and then the shadow, right? So there can be like the unhealthy relationships with food, and all of that can come too. And so the body is really important. And I feel like, you know, that higher expression of that Venus is just coming to accept the body. And this will get reflected back to you too in how you view others and their bodies. And so, right, it's always comes back to you and your relationship with your body. And so that's a big one. That's very connected into that Venus energy of like, what is your relationship to your body and that self-worth and all of that stuff that can come up.
Yeah. And moving into the shadow of Taurus a little bit, the shadow of Taurus can be hoarding energy. Like deciding that this thing has value, so I'm going to keep it, because they're functioning from that survival instinct. You think about a toddler, they're still moving from a level of survival, which is part of the reason they want to do everything themselves, is because they're reaching to hone their survival skills. And there is very much the shadow side of Taurus is hoarding, like not recognizing what is truly valuable and being willing to take on what is valuable from the outside and confuse it with your own deep inner values, forgetting and leaving off that gut instinct of the Aries, because all of this builds. This is a nice little building to whole. And you need all of the pieces. Just like Alexis was talking about, if you don't have a lot of water in your chart, go live by the water, because that's going to help keep you whole.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can also be relationship to money. Like it doesn't have to just be hoarding objects. It can be, right, hoarding money, but also like same thing, like what is your relationship to your body? What is your relationship to money? And that evolution of how that is, because, you know, there can be a lot of stigma around money, like somehow money is bad, and right, like all this. Money is beautiful. Money is how we exchange energy with each other. Money is in itself a beautiful energy. It just has a lot of crap, probably the most crap around it.
Yeah.
And so that's another Taurus theme, is what is your relationship to money, right? And are you putting the emphasis on all of these material things? But also there's the extremes, right? Of like, I don't need anything, money's not important. Like that also is denying a truth of like the luxuries that things can bring us and that money can bring us, and also not getting attached to, this is my driving force, right? This is like the most important thing is this money, you know, in my life. So that's another theme, right? Is money and your relationship to money.
Yeah. And like a journey for the Taurus can be, what were you taught is valuable? And then really like, well, is that valuable to me? Like, do I find that valuable, or is that somebody else's values that I'm carrying around? And really, I don't care.
Right. Be the toddler. Be the toddler. Exploring like, ooh, this like I know, like, yes, go out to dinner with me. Like that's my jam. Like I love it. And so it's finding the things that nourish you from that perspective of like, be the toddler, like go out, try things, you know, experience things. That is, yeah, the best way to use Taurus energy is just to like be the toddler.
Be the toddler. And like to not ever confuse what you're being offered for what you're actually worth. Like, because oftentimes what you're being offered is someone else's assessment of your value. And like really working with your Taurus energy is understanding your value and what you are actually valued at for yourself. Because then you can work with more discernment. Because, well, we love toddlers. We love going out to eat with Alexis and putting delicious things in our mouth. We also want to mature our Taurian energy towards a discernment of, well, is this good enough for me to continue to eat it? Right? We don't want to just eat it because it's in front of us. Does it nourish us? Does it fuel us? Is there value in it for me?
Right. Right. Like giving yourself to be the toddler, because that's another piece. Like, don't hold yourself back. And yes, have that discernment to, does this actually nourish me? Right. So exactly like you were saying, it's giving yourself permission. Mm-hmm. And then also like, okay, and does this nourish me? Because if it does, like, I don't have to feel guilty about it. Yeah. Right. Like, I don't have to feel guilt or shame around the things that feel good. But is this like truly, does it make me feel good? Or is it just something that I'm just grabbing for because it's there? Mm-hmm. Right. And this can be anything in our lives. Yeah. Right. Like anything external. So love it.
Our little Tauruses. We love you, little Tauruses.
Does that feel good for Taurus? Any last pieces?
No, it feels good.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm just seeing like rubbing like a really soft blanket. Like,
well, yeah, I sit in my chair with my soft fuzzy blanket and my pillows. I have my Taurus is my 10th house. It's my highest potential. And yes, the more I have moved into my Taurus, the more I'm very conscious of the fact that I like fuzzy textural things. So I tend to surround myself in that because it does feed my Venusian energy.
Yeah. Love that. Which brings us to Gemini. So Gemini we have is mutable air. Its sign is the twins. And it has this interesting dynamic, right? So now it's this starting to interact with another in a way that's very exploratory. It's like the student. Gemini is this very curious, this student, and it's that mutable air. So mutable being it changes, right? So to me, Gemini, it's an air sign. It's of the mind. It's like the Gemini mind can just go, and it's like one thing and onto the next, and it's like this almost like this Rolodex or like this very fast moving air, right? So it's mutable, fast moving, it's air, so it's of the mind and of the also spirit. Air is spirit. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, when you feel into that energy, also the twins, it has this polarity, this dynamic of, right, this back and forth kind of energy. So yeah, I find a lot of, Geminis that I know, and whether it's sun, moon, or rising, have this fast moving energy, right? And so it can also be a social sign. This is where like, the as we go through the evolution, it's like the child starts talking and interacting. And it doesn't have to be externally chatty though. I know a lot of people who have Gemini in their chart and they are social and chatty outwardly, right? But I do know some people who, and it may be like the Gemini moons, right? Or the, whatever, that internal piece where they may not seem like extroverted, but internally their mind is doing the chatty, like their mind is super chatty. And so that's another piece to remember. Like sometimes, Gemini is like the sign of the social butterfly, and people who have Gemini are like, well, I don't really identify with that. I'm not a social butterfly. Well, internally in the mind, that can be what's going on. And then they say, oh yes, I get that. That's totally my Gemini mind. So yeah, that is Gemini. It's also ruled by Mercury. So if you are a Gemini rising, Mercury will be your chart ruler. But I think Mercury is the perfect mascot for Gemini. He has the little wings on his sandals, and he just flies around super fast. He's a translator, and he can traverse all the realms. So I always think of Mercury as this very like fast moving energy. He's very social. He can talk to many people, speaks many languages. And yeah, I think he's the perfect mascot for Gemini.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love the fact that you use dynamic, because just as Aries was a yang and out, Gemini is a yang and out. There's a dynamic movement. It's a hot energy, because it is fast. It's moving and it's going. It's that thought. And Mercury is perfect for Geminis, and they're like, woo, zipping around. There's the area of the body associated with Gemini is the shoulders and the arms, where the body splits into twins. So that shoulders and arms, that's your Gemini area of your body. And so Gemini can also, like messy Gemini can have a scattered, like an all over the place feel to it. I think about the archetype of the dilettante that is always in everything just a little bit, but doesn't really sink down. And, going with that access point that you touched into earlier, that's more Sagittarius, the sinking down. So there's the communication. This is the how I think portion. We've done who I am, what I value. Here we are at how I think with Gemini. So it's how we communicate both with ourselves and with everyone around us, that internal chatty versus the external chatty. And I've got some chatty Gemini rising, Gemini suns. I love you, people. Chatty. They're looking for where the information is at. And information is their stock in trade. Like, to be able to know things, that's like a currency to them. It really is. So there's a mental organization. They're really curious, like an endless curiosity to Gemini, which can feed into that dilettante of a little bit here and a little bit there, because they're so curious. They can be headed into one thing and they can see something in that process that veers them off on a whole other path.
Yeah.
Because their curiosity is just snagged. Like, oh, come figure out what this thing is. And they may or may not come back to where it started, and that's okay. That it may have been the catalyst to move them to exactly where they needed to be. So really trusting that.
Yeah. And they'll keep the conversation very interesting, I found, right? Because their mind is always working in ways that you're like, wow, I wouldn't have even thought of that. Mm-hmm. And that can't focus energy. Like, I feel like it's allowing yourself to be okay with the mind going. Like, there's a genius in that, right? Because I think the conditioning is stay focused, right? Like that idea of like, go to school and like sit at a desk all day and focus. And that, right, is not
healthy
for many people, and especially for the strong Gemini, but across the board, right? Like, you're talking like, there's like a small percentage of people where that works for. So it's both finding the ways that you can stay grounded, right? And that you can get stuff done, because you can't just fly away, right? Gemini air, you can just fly away. So finding ways that you can stay grounded and find ways that work for you to like get things done that need to get done. And then also giving yourself the permission and the space to just go away, like to just let your mind go, because there's a genius in that. There's a beauty in that. And so I think the conditioning has been, it has to look a certain way, right? Like, we have to be focused. We have to be this, like, certain type of organized person. And the Gemini beauty is it gets to explore, it gets to be curious. And so giving yourself permission for that. And also like allowing yourself to have those conversations with yourself, with others, and giving yourself the permission to explore. Because and I think, over time, people definitely find, right? Like, I think when you're younger, you're doing like the exploring, like, how do I figure this out and make this work? I think people find their ways as they get older of like, this is what works for me and I've embraced it. But that's a piece of it too, of like really allowing the conditioning to just go out the window and just letting yourself, whatever your sign is, embracing that. Because right, there's all the diversity, but especially in that Gemini, I think of that, like that can't focus energy, which can be, right, it can be seen as good or bad, but having both the groundedness and the permission to just let
the child's mind go.
Yeah.
Like, let that child's mind go. And there can be a forgetfulness to Gemini because they're in so much and their head's moving so fast and they got places to go and things to do. And there can be that devil's advocate energy with Gemini, that the ability to be in dual stances can be received by those around them as the devil's advocate, as being unsupported by their Gemini energy people in their life. Leo's just up here and wanting to make sure. He's like, I know you're coming up on Leo soon here, girls. He had to make himself known. So, it's really communication. Gemini can also be that trickster energy because of the Mercury rulership. Cat almost fell off. I have a half blind cat. He has some depth perception challenges. And he thinks he's a 350-pound lion, and he just almost fell off my setup here. And saw the wiggling. He laid down and he missed.
Well, it feels like that mutable, right? Like, it's definitely, Gemini is not a fixed sign. It's not, nope. Definitely not that.
Definitely not that. And if I knew what time he was born, I could tell you whether he was a Gemini or Cancer, because he's right on the cusp. But I think he may be a Gemini, though he's a lover, not a thinker. So there's that trickster place. And of course, the shadow of the trickster is the liar. The mimic, there's a speed to the synthesis that can happen with Gemini, because they've got a plan and they're going and they're dancing and they're doing all the stuff, which I think is why it can feel to those around the Gemini rising or Gemini sun, like, is this trickster? And are you playing a trick? Like, you think about dealing with a child before they can find that discernment, that mental trickster energy. Can I trick you with a story? Like that tends to be what comes to mind for me. Now that I went off on my crazy Gemini cat. So there needs to be, for Gemini, I'm just going to follow this spiritual warrior to, like, how do we cultivate our spirituality? Gemini feels like the spiritual aspect of this is the synthesis of the head and the heart. So you're not just working from reason, but you're starting to dip down and pull into that heart, which we'll get to with Cancer. But there's a how does it work together? So I'm not just working from my head. And that twins, like your head and your heart, can be partners in crime rather than one or the other in charge.
Yeah. I love it. Beautiful. Any last pieces on Gemini?
The discernment of Gemini, of knowing when enough is enough, right? Knowing when to stop and take a break. Because with that very Yan energy, that going up and out and the dynamic aspect of it, does the Gemini know when to stop? Like, can they hit a point of discernment where they know when to stop? And understanding that you don't have to choose until you're ready to choose. Like, you can wait until that deep gut instinct kicks in, or you're like, oh, well, I value this more than that. You don't have to, just because your mind moves like this doesn't mean your decision making has to.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And also that like, you don't have to just pick one thing and focus on one thing, right? That it feels like Gemini is this multi-layered. It's right. Like this multi-dimensional kind of aspect where like embrace all of the things, while also learning for yourself, what are the things that keep you grounded.
Yeah. And I'm taking in the irony of this for a moment. I'm going to say one of the things that needs to be deconditioned out of a Gemini is talking too much. So there's less, it's not that scattered is bad. And words have a lot of power. So I was just laughing about the irony of that as we're on a podcast, talking away. But I'm like, talk less. So you're not just filling the airwaves, because that talking can be the sign of looping thoughts. And when we've got anything looping in our system, it creates stagnation. And so from my perspective as a body worker, I will look at, well, what are your looping thoughts and where are they settling in your body? Because that is creating some type of dis-ease or dysfunction oftentimes. And I do see it with my Gemini clients, that there is a level of looping thoughts that end up actually showing up somatically in the body. So just recognize when you're looping, and whether it's because you're saying the same thing out loud over and over and over, or it's going on in your head, that you've got a tape running in your head. How do we shut off that tape? Because it's not serving you.
Yeah, it's like hitting the pause button. And I think another like beautiful piece is to ask questions, or even if you're in conversation, like pausing, listening, right, and asking questions can also just shift that energy there. Because I think when you give yourself a moment to pause and like kind of change gears, the new thoughts that come in, right? Like, because if you're just stuck on the same thing, it doesn't give the opportunity for the new thoughts to come in.
Yeah.
Like that's the beauty of Gemini, is like there's so much. So rather than getting stuck in the looping or stuck in the same, that pause is really important. And then taking a step back, because like the new and the beautiful, like having that curious mind, like so much will come in. And I think questions are a really helpful tool as well. Right. Because even if you're in conversation and you're just talking and outputting, when you can pause and listen or ask a question, right, it shifts the dynamic of that conversation too.
Yeah. Love it. Good deal. Love to all of our Geminis.
Which brings us to Cancer. So Cancer is cardinal water. Its sign is the crab, and it's ruled by the moon. So it definitely has this lunar, soft, emotional feeling. But I've found with a lot of Cancers, they have this soft, gooey inside like a crab, but a shell in the armoring around them, right? So that's another quality of, because I've had, a lot of people who, when I was doing readings for, who are Cancer, and, talking about like the nurturing and the soft and the, in tune to emotions. And they're like, that doesn't sound like me. I was like, yes. And there's this armoring. Okay. That sounds like me. And then once you can be in those places where you can trust and where you can remove the armor, that's when the heart of Cancer really opens. And so again, it's that cardinal water. It's that beginning energy, right? That, and the water being the emotions, like how to really get in tune with the heart and those emotions that are just so important to really acknowledge and be with. Yeah. And that lunar energy feels really important also. So if you're a Cancer rising, the moon would be your chart ruler. And I find it to be really interesting for both Cancer and Leo, because we'll get to Leo next. But for Cancer, the moon doesn't retrograde, right? It's one of the only signs, that and the sun, they don't retrograde. So it's always in forward motion, but it's always changing too, right? It's got the different phases. So the moon is a very interesting one. And also like we can see it. So I just say for, if you are a Cancer rising, to just like eyes and ears out for the moon. Like where is the moon in the sky? Because we get to see it, and sometimes it's out during the day, sometimes it's out during the night, depending on what phase it's in. And yeah, it's a really beautiful quality to connect into the lunar phases, especially for Cancer rising.
Yeah. Cancer is a yin, like in and down, water, feeling soft, mushy insides. Yes, we have soft, mushy stuff going on. I've got that Cancer moon. And this is our flow of life, like Cancer for me. How does our life move and flow? What do I feel? The area of the body associated with Cancer is our rib cage and our breasts or our chest. So where do you feel safe? Like you think about the rib cage and it holds our very soft lung tissue. It protects, our heart is tucked in there, our liver's tucked up under there. There's a holding in that shell of our rib cage or the crab itself that really is holding the soft, gooey, mushy, nourishing, emotional, I cry at commercials, kind of energy going on there with Cancer. Anybody else cry at commercials? I cry at commercials.
Yeah. And I do think about Cancer and the heart, because when we get to Leo is associated with the heart. But when I think of Cancer, I think of like the inner heart. And I think of Leo as the radiant heart, like the heart that we, shine outwards. And Cancer, I think of this very internal heart, like our own emotions, the way we connect inward. It has this energy of the home and this very inner space, right? Like the inner temple, that kind of quality. So I definitely associate Cancer with the heart, even though Leo is more known to be like the sign of the heart. Cancer definitely has this big heart energy for sure.
Like for me, it's the lunar inner child, the lunar heart versus the solar heart. So that inner and outer, right? You spoke about the Leo being very radiant heart. And the Cancer is this like inner child lunar heart, the moon that has both its brightest points and its dark stage. Like it grows and it hits full and then it wanes. It waxes and it wanes. And so it's always moving, and connecting with the moon is just such a beautiful, beautiful practice. Cancer can also be the sign of the mother opposite its access point of Capricorn, which is the side of the father. So this can be a place where we dive into whether or not we're going to accept gender roles, whether or not we're going to, if our emotional identity and our self-image is going to be attached to a gender, a physical body gender, or whether we're going to have more space in that. Because like we keep talking about, all of these energies play into a whole human being. So both the feminine energy of Cancer and the masculine energy of Capricorn plug in to create a wholeness in us.
Yeah. And that quality of the family, particularly, you mentioned the mother. So definitely that mother line, but our ancestors, our family, that is very much connected to Cancer. It has that feminine energy. And I think that connection to the mother, it's also like how we nurture ourselves and how we mother ourselves, right? And I keep coming back to that, like that inner home space, like how we nurture is kind of coming up too.
I was plugging back into a moment with Aries, and how for an Aries, a threat can be like a life and death situation. For a Cancer, like a stable, solid Cancer, safety is our safety is only threatened when our actual life is. Like, not everything is a life and death situation in the way it can be with an Aries. With a Cancer, it's about like our actual life, and recognizing that our security is actually internally sourced. That's really a mature, high level Cancer aspiration, is recognizing that our security is always internally sourced.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think another piece of Cancer is taking care of others, like that mothering quality. So it can be taking care of others, and then kind of forgetting to take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. That can be common there too. Right. Almost like that martyr energy of like, I'm going to give and take care of others. And, it can come in handy when, if you're a host, like, I feel like that Cancer energy is great for hosting. It's like, what do you need? I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to like, do you want a cup of tea? Like that, I feel like is that Cancer energy. And like, you can forget to take care of yourself in that. And that's why I think that coming back to that like inner space, that inner home is so important. And it's like that idea of when your cup is full, you have more to give, right? You can't give from an empty cup. And so that I think is also a quality that I see a lot with Cancer.
And that initiating like the flow of emotions. When our emotions flow, we are healthier, we're more balanced. And, discernment, like what needs to be moved and spoken and flowed and what doesn't. Really for Cancer, it's like, please cry. Please cry. We can go into the science of the usefulness of tears and the hormones that are released and how it actually does chemically stabilize you to cry. It is really super important. And when we suppress that, when we put that away, we're kind of, we're making a mess of our inner home. Like Alexis has been talking about home with Cancer. And when we suppress what we feel, when we push it down and we don't allow it to flow, the cardinal energy of Cancer, we're kind of dirtying our home space, because we are our best and longest standing home. We are our best and longest standing relationship. So to be able to be really emotionally open with yourself, and I'm not saying you have to go out and cry in public. I'm just saying it is a really, really valuable thing to allow yourself to have.
Yeah. And just to move those emotions, like whatever the emotions are, feels really important, because there can be that, like that stagnant or that stuck energy is not going to be well for Cancer. It's like really needs to move that energy. So whatever that emotion is, and another thing of like being conditioned that like, it's not okay to cry, not okay to be angry. Like there's only certain emotions that are okay. And it's like getting away from that and really just letting whatever the emotions are move through, because that's really important, that flow. Like definitely it's a flow of emotions kind of sign. And so, when you don't allow that, it can really cause that stuckness. And then the other piece as well of that, like armoring with that crab, coming back to the symbol of the crab, that armoring can, you can go through your whole life armored. Right. And so that's another kind of piece of like realizing that, like, oh, what am I armoring against? Right. Because there is risk in opening and taking off that armor and letting that ooey gooey soft inside be seen. And also the discernment, right, of like, there's places for that and knowing the places and building the trust. But that's really also another piece of it, of like de-armoring is really beautiful. And like, you get to experience so much more when you make the choice to even just layer by layer start de-armoring.
And I think about plugging back into what you were saying about that mother, the aggressive nurturing, I'm just going to nurture until I drop. that's distorted, messy Cancer energy, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. And so to really be in that beautiful Cancer energy is working with I think about how often I hear from people, well, I can't do that because of my job. Your job does not need that much nurturing, folks. I don't care if you're a small business owner or if you work for a corporation. You feeding and nourishing yourself is actually going to create a loop that feeds and nourishes your business, your children, your relationship, whatever it is that you want to pour yourself into. We first have to pour ourselves into ourselves. We have to be willing to take time off and to step away and to commit to really deeply nourishing self, because then we come back to what we're trying to grow, children, a business, whatever it is, with something to offer, with actual nourishment. It's like the wolf that goes out to hunt. If the wolf just stays with her pups all the time, she will starve to death and die. She has to at some point say, y'all stay here. I'm going to go out and hunt something because I need to eat. And then I'm going to bring back what I don't eat for you. And that's vital for our survival as healthy emotional creatures.
Yeah. Yep. The image of taking a bath is coming. So I feel like that's also a very, a very Cancer nurturing activity, is taking a bath.
Take a bath, have some salt, some candles.
Yep. Right. Because it is that break from like, I'm just going to take a bath and this is me time. And I just get to go into that space for me. Right. And so for whatever it is, it could be a cup of tea. It could be, reading a book. But a bath, obviously with the water element, was what was coming.
Yeah. A bath sounds fabulous right now. I'm cold.
Yes. Yeah. And it's that warm, like comfort, right? That almost allows that armoring to just like, just melt away. Just when I'm nourished, like that, I feel safe to just
get mushy.
Yeah.
Get mushy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Any last pieces on Cancer?
No.
Perfect.
It's okay to feel everything you feel, little Cancers.
Okay, so that brings us to Leo. Leo is fixed fire, and it's a sign of the lion. The heart we mentioned, it's this radiant heart. It has this very like expressive outward leadership energy. It also has a playful energy. So again, just coming back to that is the, the overall energy is this, this leader, this like, look at me, like I'm just seeing like this, like, gorgeous like outfit of like, I don't know, some radiant like fashion, but that is for sure Leo. And I've also had, again, coming back to, okay, well, that doesn't exactly sound like me. There generally can be also this just playfulness, this like humor, this lightness that is brought to it, right? So we're giving examples. And again, it's like taking it into the different ways it can look, because there's many different ways that it can look. But Leo definitely has all of that. And it has this leadership energy, this almost like teacher energy, but different. We'll get to Sagittarius can be teacher, but it's almost this just teaching by just being you. It's very just like, this is me, right? Like, this is me. Here I am, Leo energy. So yeah.
Leo rising, reporting and for duty. Yes, there's a play and a creativity to Leo. Leo is, the lion, and you think about watching cats play. Even my Leo, who plays by himself constantly, like the creativity that's there, the play, And there can be a call for attention with Leo that can be a messy piece of Leo. Pay attention to me. Hey, mom, look at me. That's Leo energy. Hey, mom, look at me. And there's ruled by the sun. So the sun nourishes our planet. So there is a feeling into what Alexis said. There is Leo leadership comes with a sense of nourishment for me when I think about it. That really leaning into leading by example, leading almost from behind rather than leading in the front of the room and talking at. It is yang energy, where again, we're an outward, it's fire. There's a fixed, Leo holds the flame. So Aries comes in and with the matches, with the little Bic lighters, and starts the fire. Leo holds it. And Alexis had mentioned that I'm a firewalking instructor. And yeah, like it hadn't been something I had put together until you said it. But yes, I start the fire and then I hold the fire. I maintain it. My fixed Leo energy shows up and holds that fire. There's an electromagnetism to Leos, I think. I think of the Leos that I've known, and there's a draw to them. People want to be in their orbit. So there's that community aspect to Leos, where people the Leos that are really running their energy cleanly and shining their suns beautiful, people want to be around them.
Yeah, for sure. It feels good to be around them because they bring that just authentic version of who they are. And there's also generally this like playfulness and this lightness and this like, it feels good. Also with the sun being the ruler of Leo, again, if you're a Leo rising, which you can probably speak to this, of the sun, again, doesn't go retrograde, right? So when you're following the sun is pretty, right? Like the sun's pretty, if you look at the moon is different because the moon is always changing, right? Mm-hmm. The phases are always different. The sun is pretty like it rises, it sets, and right, it's like forward, like, right, there's no retrograde, like it's very if we're fixed, it's very like we know what's going to happen with the sun. And so that's another piece to, as a Leo rising, is just to like connect with the sun. Even if you don't wake up early, every once in a while wake up and see the sunrise and just see what it does for you. And just take note of like, oh, as the sun's moving through the zodiac, what sign is it in? Just again, right, like taking note of where the sun is, because it brings this radiance that almost is like this fuel, right? But it's interesting because it doesn't go retrograde. It's different. It's the only, Leo and the sun are the only, or should I say the sun is the only ruler, is Leo, right? So it's the only time it happens in the zodiac is just for Leo risings, is to have the sun as your ruler. And so I think it's just, there's some uniqueness there, but yeah.
Yeah, as someone who lives in the northern reaches of the northern hemisphere, I'm very, very sun-led. I spent a summer living in Alaska. Summers in Alaska, if you're following the sun, is not a good thing. Because I this time of year in the winter, I don't really feel awake and good and like I can function until the sun comes up. And once the sun goes down, I turn into a pumpkin, like put me to bed. So as the days shift and as the seasons shift, my ability to function and my ability to move forward and shine my light shifts per the seasons because of the way that the sun shifts. I couldn't live in it. I don't put me any place where it's dark a lot of hours of the year. Like I have enough problems here in Minnesota in the dark. So there is as a radiance to Leo's self-expression, and going with that build, Leos can only shine when they feel safe. So you have to really nourish your Cancer energy for your Leo energy to shine. If you don't feel safe in the world, you don't feel like you can allow your creative expression out with any level of safety.
Yeah. Yeah. And the word courage is coming. Like it takes a courage. You know, when you think about like that lion heart, like that courageous heart, yeah, like it takes that, that is needed to be able to express yourself authentically. Cause they're also like, that is, there's a vulnerability in that. And, you know, and the more unique you are, the better, but that can be scary. And so, yeah, I feel like the more authentic you can be, for sure. Right. And then coming back again to whether it's your sun, moon, or rising, or you have certain planets there can be a different flavor to how that looks. Right. Like I spoke into how I know some Leos who are like outwardly like, yes, here I am. And there are some that, you know, are a little more subdued, but they have this, like when they're on fire, they have this like humor, or they have this just like, it just feels good to be around them. So again, there's a different quality to, right, like what planets are there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a really, it's really important for Leo that like keeping an open heart with the world, that radiant heart being open, shining your generosity. This is the place where we access the higher self through the little self. By tapping into that radiant heart and becoming centered in that. You know, in our Aquarius season podcast, we spoke about Mercury cazimi, and we've talked about Venus being cazimi because she recently was back at the beginning of January 2022. I almost said 2022. And that being in the heart of the sun, we spoke about the clarity that's there. The clarity of our message when we're dealing with Mercury, the clarity of our value and our worth and what we want to build when we're dealing with Venus. And that Leo energy is really staying in the center of heart so that we can know thyself, small s, which allows us access to self, higher self, big S.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a creativity with Leo. I think of the show Project Runway, and there was an episode where they did signs of the zodiac, and a lot of them were Leos, like almost all of them were Leos. And so I think of that too, like that kind of energy of like very creative and very like walking down the runway, like to me, right, has an element to Leo. And yeah, and again, it doesn't have to always be the outward way, right? It's like, if I can just be that for myself, if I can be that sure of myself, it may look a million different ways, right? Like I may just be expressing it in a different way, but like that quality always comes. I think of that like Project Runway, like, and the episode was just great because it was like, literally there was all Leos, and it was like, this makes sense. Like that creative, right? Like it just makes sense. And especially with the clothes, right, and the like ability to like radiate out through clothes is one way to express. But yeah, I always think of that. There was another piece too, but maybe it'll come back.
Okay, we have space for it to come back. Yeah, you know that since we've touched on the shadow of every sign, the shadow of Leo is like, pay attention to me, pay attention to me, pay attention to me, regardless of whether there's any alignment or not, or whether there's any anything worth seeing. I have a kid, and he can bring me absolutely everything he draws. It doesn't mean that everything is worth sharing. Sometimes he brings me amazing, beautiful stuff. And there is that childlike, look at me, pay attention to me, that can veer into narcissism. Like that messy Leo veers into narcissism. So a well-informed, balanced level of centered in self, so that I can radiate by being who I am, calls in the healthy attention that Leo seeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the other piece that it came back was if we're looking at like the evolution, Leo is that phase. It's like your 20s. It's like those college years when you're just like exploring and, things might be a little bit messy, but you're having fun and you're just exploring who you are. Like that is that stage of life for Leo. Yeah. Is that like, right? Like self-exploratory time.
Yeah. Figuring out who you are and what you want to, how you want to shine in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love it. Any last pieces for Leo?
We love you, Leo.
Love me some Leo. Yeah.
So yeah, Virgo. Our friend Virgos.
Yeah. So Virgo is mutable earth. So it's fast moving earth, which is interesting. We'll get into that because it's ruled by Mercury. So it has an interesting quality for earth. And its symbol is the maiden. But yeah, I find mutable earth, it almost has this quality of like, because it has Mercury as the ruler, where it's faster moving earth. Sometimes it can almost feel like air because it has this communication feel to it. It's definitely earth though. And it has this ability to really bring things into reality, like the structure, the organization, the ability to like bring things into being. But it's interesting when you think about earth is so solid and generally, right, like a fixed kind of energy. So when you think about mutable earth, it's bringing in this flexibility to the groundedness, right? So it's it's an interesting energy, I feel. But it definitely has, because it has Mercury as a ruler, and you can feel into Mercury as a ruler of Gemini and a Mercury as a ruler of Virgo, has a different quality. So again, if you are a Virgo rising, Mercury will be your chart ruler. But yes, definitely has this ability to bring things into being. And the symbol being the maiden, I also say, it's a sign of the priestess, that priestess, like being able to channel spirit into being, into the earth, this very like embodied way of taking spirit, thoughts, whatever, like information, and bringing it into reality.
So the area of the body that's associated with Virgo is the solar plexus, which is where our digestion kind of starts with the stomach and headed into the small intestine. And when we look at that, it's the breaking down of what is of value. So for me, Virgo has this almost alchemical quality to it in its ability to distill down what is useful and what is not useful. I have a child that is a triple earth. He has a Virgo moon. So that understanding and being able to organize is his way of working through an alchemical process of distillation to just come up with the essence of what he needs to know to be able to move from his, what can feel like a very stuck earth place, my little triple earth. And having that earth energy is really beautiful. And it's the breaking down of what we need through organization. Like that priestess that comes in and does the alchemy to just bring it to its essence.
Yeah. Yes. And a shadow side to Virgo can be control, for sure. Like this wanting to hold on to control. And the antidote to that is to be able to let go and to let things flow and let things move, right? There's that mutable quality that when things are really flowing, Virgo gets to be like its highest expressed version. But control can be a shadow side of Virgo for sure. That grasping onto, right, and whatever that version is, like I want to know, like I want to be able to know things and have this like sure kind of quality, where we know life is not like that. There's so much unknown. So this control and grasp on whatever it is, right? And it can be in many different ways. It can be grasping onto relationships, or like our work, or just needing to know everything, can be that shadow side of Virgo. And so the antidote, again, it's just that being able to release. When I think about what's opposite of Virgo in the chart, is Pisces, which is totally that like surrender, flow, letting things go kind of energy. So that I find for sure comes up with Virgo. And it's also the sign of the healer. And so there can be a lot of energy of service and healing, and it can be connected with, you know, like when you think of like nursing, or, you know, the medical field, healing. I also think the energy that's popping in is Hygeia, like this energy of the healer can definitely come with Virgo too.
Yeah, that wanting to understand every small piece, because if I don't understand every small piece, I can't understand any of it. Yes, is a Virgo downfall. Because it skips the fact that we can't possibly understand everything. It's so much wanting to go to that Mercury place of the mind. And that things are constantly moving and shifting, so we can't understand everything. And I think that can lead to Virgos seeming overly critical, and even analysis paralysis. Like they can't make any decisions until they know all of the things. And the reality is we can't know all the things.
Right.
We just can't.
Yep. Yeah. That over analyzing. Right. The like over analyzing things, because Mercury is the ruler. It has this, like, there is great, again, like the way the mind works, it's great and beautiful. And you can overanalyze, and you can get really stuck in the reality of it, right? The earth sign, it's like almost taking a step back and being like, oh, we are way more than just this, what is going on in my day-to-day mundane life, that we are so much more, right? And so there's that quality too of like the just getting really stuck in the mundane and in the what we can see, and allowing that to dictate everything.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, just take a step back, like let's look around, because that like that fixated energy, and again, because it's mutable, there's a potential for the flexibility to be there. There's a potential for it to be able to see different perspectives and I feel like that connection to spirit is really important, because it's a sign of the priestess. It's like that connection to spirit is kind of a key. It's like without that, you're just running around in the mundane, very like, you know, tied into that. But when you bring in the spirit, it's like, oh, that's the piece, that's the key, that's what I can actually channel, and that's what I can actually bring in and make manifest. And that's a gift in that.
Yeah. And that's beautiful. Because it is that perfectionism, this is what it should be versus what it is. And allowing to make allowing for there to be adjustments, that mutable beauty of it, and recognizing there's a difference between being detail oriented and being critical, right? Detail oriented is something that I personally have on my good list. Yay for being detail oriented. Because I don't know it's something that I'm all that strong at. And at the same time, there are moments when I'm really into something I am, where I can really call in that Virgo mutable, move with this, shift with this, play with this, to make the necessary adjustments, rather than like going into shutdown. Because Virgos can go into shutdown. They can get so overwhelmed by the fact that this is not like it should be, because it isn't perfect. And I'm, just feeling so critical of this. I'm going to just shut it all down and be like, whoop, which can lead to them feeling really victimized, or even being hypochondriacs. This is the shadowy side of Virgo, is that hypochondriac energy.
Yeah, I think perfectionism is a great word for Virgo, right? And again, the beauty of that is like we need that. We need people who can be detail oriented, who can refine. I think, right, you can go from perfectionism to refine. Like we need to refine things. There's a beautiful quality in that. There's a beautiful energy in that. And right, like you can feel both sides of it. Like you can take it too far and to like that, like everything needs to be perfect. And I'm just like, oh my God, like I'm just too hard on myself. And there's the like, oh, like there's a refinement in it. Like that is, I love that, like that I can refine and that I can be in tune to the details of things and make things better. And then the evolutionary part, if you feel into like that late 20s energy, like you've graduated college and it's like, it's this serious, like, oh no, what do I need to do with my life? Right. And like when you're in it, that's what it feels like. But it's really that fine tuning, like, okay, where do I want to go? Like, where do I want my, like, I've had my adolescent years, I've had my, fun college years. I'm kind of still figuring it out, but okay, where do I want to focus? Like, what do I want to focus on? And so it's that point in the evolution. But there can also be this like taking things too seriously quality too, right? Because like, yeah, you can pick a career in your late 20s or pick a, what you want to do, but it doesn't mean you're going to be doing it in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Right? So there's that quality too of like taking things too seriously. And just remembering again, like nothing is permanent. Nothing is set in stone. It's just this choice. And things can change.
Yeah. It's like purification is the word that keeps coming, which is a very Virgo word, to be in that like pure alchemical, take it just down to its essence. That's a very Virgo, like I just want its pure essence.
Yeah. And I think because there is this service quality of like wanting to serve, and it can be in many different ways, right? Again, it's a reminder to like take a break and nourish self. Because I found with a lot of Virgos, it's like a lot of this energy of doing and right, like wanting to help and serve, and again, like having to take it back and be like, okay, yeah, like I can take a breath, I can take a break, and come back to self.
Yeah. And like to plug this into the earth sign of it a little bit more, nature is the original alchemist. Like we just have to look at the water cycle for that. I mean, nature is consistently moving water, filtering it through the earth, filtering it through the rocks and the sediments to purify it. So there is that, reaching for, how do we distill this and move towards purification? I don't want to say perfection, but purification, so that it's in its highest form.
Yeah. And that connection to, I mean, I mentioned spirit, but that connection to just like our deeper desires, our purpose, right? And like without getting stuck in like, what is my purpose? But just connected into like why am I doing this? Because I think another quality of Virgo is it can get very stuck in the mundane of the doing and getting like forgetting the why. I think it's important to remember like the why you're doing this, or because maybe you're focused your energy in not the right space. Because a Virgo, like in its essence, when it's doing what it loves, it is just so on, like it is just like on fire with how it's able to direct and get things done. So yeah, again, like what is your why, like what is the purpose, what is the bigger picture? Because otherwise you can get lost in the mundane kind of tasks.
Yeah. remember that to really decondition and to find that healthy Virgo energy, you need to stay away from the excess of conditioned logic. Like Alexis was saying, like, it's not just the earth stuff, it's plugging into spirit. Because when we plug into spirit, it moves us out of conditioned logic and into something much higher and much deeper.
Yeah. Because when you think about that period, like that, if we're talking about late 20s, but whenever it is of that, like focusing on starting to move into an area of service, right? It doesn't have to be like service in traditional ways, but of how is what I'm doing serving the collective, right? And it has to serve me first, and I have to be like inspired, but it does, right? Like me just serving my gifts and just being connected to me does serve the collective, right? So it's that perspective too of like, we've moved through the zodiac and now we're at this point where it's like, oh yeah, there is this connection to how what I do influences the whole.
Yeah. How do I serve now that I figured out who I am, Aries, what I value, Taurus, how I think, Gemini, how I feel, Cancer, how I'm going to create and shine my light, Leo. That moves us into how are we going to use what we've been building on to serve.
I love it.
Yay.
Beautiful. Any last pieces on Virgo before we wrap up part 1 of our?
No, I just, don't get caught in perfectionism, Virgos. We love you.
Love it.
And we'll be back for part 2. So until then, stay tuned.